Bullies humiliate the goth girl. Bad idea. She's a genius hacker. Raven Blackwood moved through the crowded hallways of Westfield High like a shadow, her combat, boots making soft thuds against the polished linoleum floor. At 17, she stood average height but seemed smaller somehow, hunched beneath the weight of her oversized black hoodie. Her pale skin contrasted sharply with the dark, kohl-rimmed around her green eyes, and her jet-black hair hung in front of her face like a protective curtain. Silver chains clinked softly from her studded black messenger bag, and her black-painted fingernails tapped nervously against her phone as she navigated the morning rush. The other students parted around her like she carried some contagious disease. Whispers followed in her wake. Freak, weirdo, Satan worshipper. Raven had heard them all before. She'd been at Westfield for 3 months now, ever since her family moved from Portland, and the routine never changed. Keep your head down. Get to class. Survive another day. What none of them knew was that beneath her dark exterior lurked one of the most brilliant technical minds of her generation. While her classmates scrolled through social media, Raven coded. While they played video games, she penetrated firewalls. Her bedroom was a fortress of monitors, servers, and custom-built machines that hummed with digital power. At 13, she'd already helped the FBI track down cybercriminals. By 15, she'd discovered vulnerabilities in major corporate systems and quietly reported them. Now, at 17, she could infiltrate virtually any network on Earth. But here at Westfield High, she was just the weird goth girl who dressed like Halloween every day. Marcus Thompson spotted her first, as he always did. The 6'2" quarterback had the kind of confident swagger that came from being worshipped by half the school. His perfectly styled blonde hair caught the fluorescent lights as he nudged his 2 constant companions, Jake Rivera and Tyler Knox. All 3 wore their letter jackets like armor, announcing their status to anyone who might have forgotten. "Look what crawled out of the cemetery," Marcus called out, loud enough for the entire hallway to hear. His voice carried that particular tone of cruelty that teenage boys perfected, casual, mocking, designed to strip away dignity with surgical precision. Raven's jaw tightened, but she kept walking. Don't engage. Don't give them what they want. Just make it to computer science class. "Hey, vampire girl," Jake shouted, jogging to catch up with her. "I'm talking to you." She turned the corner toward the science wing, hoping to lose them in the crowd. But Marcus was already there, blocking her path with his broad frame. His crystal blue eyes glittered with the kind of malicious amusement that made her stomach turn. "Where's your coffin, freak?" he asked, grinning at his own wit. "Or do you sleep hanging upside down like a bat?" Tyler snickered from behind her, effectively boxing her in. Maybe she's late for her séance. The hallway was full of students, but they all suddenly found their lockers fascinating. Teachers walked past without slowing down. This was Marcus Thompson, after all. Star athlete, honor roll student. His father donated generously to the school's athletic program. Teachers saw what they wanted to see. "Excuse me," Raven said quietly, trying to step around Marcus. Her voice came out smaller than she intended, swallowed by the acoustics of the crowded hallway. "Did you guys hear something?" Marcus asked, cupping his ear theatrically. Sounded like a mouse squeaking. Jake laughed. "Maybe it was a ghost. You know, like her personality." Raven's hands clenched into fists inside her hoodie pockets, but she forced herself to stay calm. These idiots had no idea what she was capable of. With 15 minutes and a laptop, she could ruin their lives completely. She could expose every private message, every embarrassing photo, every secret they'd ever tried to hide. She could crash their phones, empty their bank accounts, destroy their digital existences entirely. But that wasn't who she wanted to be. Violence, even digital violence, only created more violence. Her parents had raised her to be better than that. Just get through today, she told herself. Just survive. The warning bell rang, and Marcus stepped aside with exaggerated politeness. "Run along to your spooky classes Wednesday, Adams. Try not to curse anyone today." Raven hurried past them, her cheeks burning with humiliation. Behind her, she could hear their laughter echoing off the walls like verbal daggers. She made it to computer science just as the final bell rang, sliding into her seat in the back corner where she could hide behind her laptop screen. Mrs. Patterson was explaining database architecture, but Raven barely listened. Instead, she found herself pulling up network monitoring tools, watching the digital traffic flow through Westfield's systems. She could see everything, every email, every file transfer, every login attempt. The school's security was laughably weak. She could have administrative access in about 30 seconds if she wanted it, but she didn't want it. She just wanted to be left alone. The pattern repeated itself every day for 2 weeks. Marcus and his crew would find her in the hallways, the cafeteria, the library. They'd make their jokes, call their names, perform their little theatrical displays of dominance while everyone else watched and did nothing. Each incident was carefully calibrated, cruel enough to hurt, but never quite crossing the line into anything a teacher might feel obligated to address. In the cafeteria, they'd accidentally bump into her, sending her tray flying. In the hallways, they'd block her path and force her to ask permission to pass. In gym class, they'd make sure she was always picked last, always paired with the most reluctant partner. The worst part wasn't the humiliation, it was the isolation. Other students treated her like she was radioactive, afraid that associating with the weird goth girl might make them targets too. She ate lunch alone, worked on projects alone, sat alone in assemblies, while everyone else chatted with friends. This is temporary, she reminded herself every night as she retreated to her room and lost herself in code. 2 more years, and I'll be at MIT or Stanford, surrounded by people who actually understand intelligence. These morons will be washing cars or working retail while I'm changing the world. But knowing it was temporary didn't make the daily humiliation any easier to bear. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in October. Raven had been having a particularly difficult morning. Her grandmother had been rushed to the hospital the night before, and she'd stayed up until 3 a.m. helping her parents coordinate with doctors in Portland. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, and running on about 4 hours of sleep. She was just trying to get through lunch without incident when Marcus appeared at her table like a predator who'd scented blood in the water. His letter jacket was perfectly arranged, his smile perfectly cruel. "Well, well," he said, loud enough for half the cafeteria to hear. "If it isn't our resident witch. You look even more dead than usual today. Rough night in the graveyard?" Jake and Tyler flanked him, grinning with the kind of mob mentality that turned ordinary cruelty into something vicious. Around them, other students began to pay attention, sensing drama in the air. "Please," Raven said quietly, not looking up from her untouched sandwich. "Not today." "Oh, she speaks," Marcus exclaimed, clapping his hands together. "I was starting to think you'd put a curse on yourself. You know, vow of silence and all that witchy stuff." "Maybe she's casting spells," Tyler suggested, "trying to turn us all into toads or something." "Newsflash, Goth Girl," Jake added. "Your magic isn't working. We're still here, and you're still a freak." Raven could feel the weight of 100 stares pressing down on her. The cafeteria had gone quiet, except for the low hum of conversation from tables far enough away to pretend they weren't watching. Mrs. Henderson, the lunch monitor, was conveniently looking in the other direction. "I said please," Raven repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus leaned down until his face was level with hers. "And I said I don't care. You know what your problem is, vampire girl? You think you're special, you think dressing like a Halloween decoration makes you interesting. But you're not special. You're just a pathetic little freak who doesn't know how to fit in." Something inside Raven's chest cracked like ice under pressure. The exhaustion, the worry about her grandmother, the weeks of accumulated humiliation, it all crystallized into a moment of perfect, terrible clarity. "You want to know what makes me special?" she asked, finally looking up to meet his eyes. Marcus blinked, clearly not expecting a response. "What?" "Nothing you'd understand," she said quietly. But something in her tone must have conveyed the danger underneath, because Marcus's confident smirk faltered for just a moment. He recovered quickly, but Raven had seen it, the brief flicker of uncertainty. "Whatever, freak," he said, straightening up. "Enjoy eating alone." Again. As they walked away, Raven heard Tyler stage whisper, "Seriously, what's wrong with her? Does she think being creepy is a personality?" "Her parents probably don't even love her," Jake replied. "I mean, look at her, who could love that?" The words hit Raven like physical blows. Her hands shook as she packed up her untouched lunch and walked quickly toward the exit. She made it to the empty computer lab before the tears started falling. Enough, she thought, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Enough. For the first time since starting at Westfield, Raven Blackwood began to plan. That night, she sat in her bedroom surrounded by the gentle glow of multiple monitors. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with the fluid grace of a concert pianist, writing code that would have impressed graduate students at MIT. She didn't sleep. She didn't eat. She worked with the focused intensity of someone who had finally found their purpose. By morning, she had everything she needed. The next few days were a masterclass in self-control. Marcus and his crew continued their harassment, but Raven endured it with the patience of someone who knew the ending of the story. She watched them carefully, cataloging their habits, their schedules, their weaknesses. She noted which classes they cut, which teachers they brown-nosed, which lies they told their parents. She learned that Marcus was desperately hiding his poor performance in advanced chemistry from his college-bound girlfriend, that Jake had been cheating on his boyfriend with a girl from the rival school, that Tyler had been stealing money from the concession stand he managed for the drama club. But more importantly, she discovered their greatest vulnerability, their phones. Like most teenagers, they lived their entire lives through their devices. Every embarrassing photo, every private conversation, every secret they'd ever thought was safely hidden, it was all there, just waiting for someone with the skills to find it. On Friday afternoon, as the final bell rang and students flooded toward the parking lot, Raven made her move. Marcus was holding court near the main entrance, surrounded by his usual crowd of admirers. He was in the middle of some story about his latest conquest on the football field, gesturing wildly with his phone in his hand. So there I was, 4th down and goal, he was saying. The whole game on the line, and coach looks at me and says, his phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then began buzzing continuously like an angry electronic insect. What the hell? Marcus muttered, looking down at the screen. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. Around him, other phones started buzzing. Jake pulled out his device with a confused frown that quickly melted into horror. Tyler's phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree. Across the parking lot, students were pulling out their phones and staring at screens with expressions of shock, amusement, and dawning understanding. The carefully orchestrated social hierarchy of Westfield High was crumbling in real time. Raven stood near the science building, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. With a few lines of code, she had simultaneously accessed every phone connected to the school's Wi-Fi network, but she hadn't attacked everyone indiscriminately. She was surgical, precise, elegant. Marcus's phone was displaying every lie he'd ever told, every cruel message he'd sent, every moment of weakness he'd tried to hide. His text conversations with his girlfriend revealed the truth about his failing grades, his steroid use, his contempt for the losers who worshipped him. Photos he'd taken of himself in compromising positions were being broadcast to every device in a 50-yard radius. Jake's phone was revealing his elaborate web of romantic deception, complete with screenshots of dating profiles he'd created to meet girls while supposedly in a committed relationship. Messages where he mocked his boyfriend to his football teammates were being shared with surgical precision. Tyler's phone was documenting months of theft from the drama club, complete with photos of himself counting stolen money and text messages to drug dealers in the next town over. But the piece de resistance was the video. Raven had been recording their harassment for weeks, using the school's own security cameras and her nearly invisible network penetration. Now compiled into a greatest hits collection of cruelty, every moment of their bullying was playing on every screen in the parking lot. Marcus shoving smaller kids into lockers, Jake tripping honor students in the hallway, Tyler making cruel jokes about other students' appearances, disabilities, family situations. The crowd around Marcus had dissolved. Students were backing away like he carried a contagious disease. Some were laughing, others looked disgusted. A few were taking pictures of his red, sweating face. "Turn it off!" Marcus screamed, frantically tapping at his phone screen. How do I turn this off? But there was no turning it off. Raven had designed the program to be self-sustaining, spreading through the local network like a benevolent virus. Every attempt to shut it down only triggered new revelations. Jake was crying, now his carefully constructed image crumbling as his secret conversations were displayed for everyone to see. Tyler had thrown his phone on the ground and was stomping on it, but the damage was already done. The information had spread to every device in range. IMS. Davidson, the vice principal, came running from the administrative building, her own phone in her hand. She looked at the crowd, at the chaos, at the three boys who had been untouchable just moments before. "What is happening here?" she demanded. "Someone hacked our phones," Marcus said, his voice cracking with desperation. "This is illegal. This is a crime." Ms. Davidson looked at her own screen, where the evidence of months of bullying was playing in crisp high definition. Her expression grew colder with each passing second. "Mr. Thompson," she said quietly, "I think we need to have a conversation." From her position near the science building, Raven watched the drama unfold with clinical detachment. She felt no joy in their humiliation, no satisfaction in their tears. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. It was about showing everyone, the bullies, the bystanders, the administrators who had looked the other way, that actions had consequences. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. That was beautiful. "Whoever you are, you're my hero." Then another, "Yes!" Those jerks finally got what they deserved. And another, "Holy shit! How did you do that? That was incredible." Students were looking around the parking lot now, trying to figure out who was responsible for the digital reckoning, but Raven had covered her tracks perfectly. Her intrusion had been invisible, untraceable, professional. She was a ghost in the machine. As the crowd began to disperse and the 3 former bullies were marched toward the administrative building, Raven quietly walked to her mother's car. She slid into the passenger seat and pulled out her own phone, quickly running a diagnostic to ensure there was no digital evidence linking her to the afternoon's events. Clean, perfect, untouchable. "How was school today, honey?" her mother asked, pulling out of the parking lot. "Better," Raven said quietly. "Much better." Over the weekend, the story spread through social media like wildfire. Students who had never spoken to Raven before were messaging her, asking if she was okay, apologizing for not standing up to the bullies. The video compilation had been shared thousands of times, with comments ranging from amazement to outrage to grudging respect for the unknown hacker who had orchestrated such perfect digital justice. Marcus, Jake, and Tyler faced immediate suspension. The evidence on their phones had revealed not just their bullying behavior, but a pattern of academic dishonesty, substance abuse, and in Tyler's case, outright theft. College recruiters who had been courting Marcus suddenly went silent. Jake's boyfriend broke up with him in a very public Instagram post. Tyler was arrested for the money he'd stolen from the drama club. But more importantly, the culture of the East school began to change. Students who had been targets of bullying found their voices. Teachers who had been conveniently blind to harassment suddenly became vigilant. The unspoken rule that popular athletes could do whatever they wanted was shattered. Monday morning, Raven walked through the hallways of Westfield High to a completely different reception. Students nodded at her respectfully. Some smiled. A few brave souls actually said hello. She was no longer invisible, no longer a target. She was someone to be reckoned with. But the real change came from within. As she sat in her computer science class, Raven realized that she no longer needed to hide behind her dark clothes and heavy makeup. She no longer needed to make herself small and invisible. She had found her power, and more importantly, she had learned how to use it responsibly. Mrs. Patterson was discussing cybersecurity, talking about the importance of ethical hacking and digital responsibility. She caught Raven's eye and smiled. Knowingly, the most powerful hackers, Mrs. Patterson said, are the ones who understand that with great ability comes great responsibility. They use their skills to protect the vulnerable, to expose injustice, to make the world a better place. Raven nodded, understanding the message. She had crossed a line on Friday, and while the results had been satisfying, she knew it couldn't become a pattern. Power without restraint was just another form of bullying. After class, she stopped by Mrs. Patterson's desk. "I was wondering," Raven said quietly, "if you knew about any cybersecurity internships for high school students. Maybe something with ethical hacking or digital forensics." Mrs. Patterson smiled. "I think I know just the program. There's a company in Portland that specifically looks for talented young people who understand both the technical and ethical aspects of cybersecurity. Would you be interested?" "Very," Raven said. As she walked home that afternoon, Raven thought about the future. In 2 years, she would indeed be at MIT or Stanford, surrounded by people who appreciated intelligence and innovation. But more importantly, she would be someone who had learned to stand up for herself and others without losing her moral compass. The goth clothes and dark makeup were still part of who she was, but they no longer defined her. She was Raven Blackwood, brilliant hacker, defender of the defenseless, architect of digital justice. She was someone who had learned that the greatest power came not from hurting others, but from protecting them. Marcus Thompson would recover. Eventually, he would learn humility, develop empathy, maybe even become a better person. Jake and Tyler would face their consequences and hopefully emerge wiser. The school would become a safer place for everyone, and Raven would continue to walk through the halls of Westfield High with her head held high, no longer hiding in the shadows, finally comfortable in her own skin. The weird goth girl had become something much more dangerous and much more valuable. She had become herself,